When you think of the Philippines in the context of World War II, you might see American General Douglas MacArthur marching onto that beach on Leyte with an avenging force of American and Filipino soldiers in tow. If we fix our scope on this phase of the war, namely the 1944 to 1945 Philippines campaign, we might surmise that the Americans were fighting for the liberation of their Filipino brothers, whose islands had been subjected to a sadistic Japanese occupation since mid-1942. Sure, a great many Americans and Filipinos fought side by side against a common enemy during the Second World War, but that did not mean they were stalwart friends. In fact, the United States and the Philippines have, to say the least, a rather turbulent history. In this video, we shed some light on Filipino-American relations in the early years of the 20th century, focusing on American and Filipino atrocities committed in the Philippine-American War. The Spanish Empire and the Americans were at each other's throats, so it was only natural that the Americans involved themselves in the conflict taking place in the Philippines, providing support to the revolutionaries. After the Filipinos and Americans defeated the Spanish, the US and Spain signed a treaty in Paris, ending the Spanish-American War. This treaty stipulated that Spain had to give the Philippines to the US. To sweeten the deal, the US gave Spain $20 million, essentially buying the Philippines from Spain. If the Filipinos thought the Spanish sucked, they were in for a surprise. After the Spanish defeat, Filipino revolutionary leader Emilio Aguinaldo established the first Philippine Republic, with himself as president. But the Americans were not having a bar of it. They'd already mailed the check. This understandably caused a bit of tension, and by February 1899, a full-blown war had broken out between the Filipinos and, in quotation marks, the new proprietors of the Philippine Islands. This was the Philippine-American War. America's game plan with the Filipinos was one of, quote, benevolent assimilation, because those two words clearly go hand in hand. According to Andrew Clem's article, The Filipino Genocide, published in the journal Historical Perspectives, the occupying Americans were prejudiced against the Filipinos, dehumanizing them with racial slurs. In Clem's words, the ideas about racial differences were ideally suited for the goal of annexing the Philippines. The United States needed to either bring the Filipinos into the fold or remove them from the islands. One of the more benevolent ways the Americans brought them into the fold was through education, with white teachers, mostly women, coming to the Philippines to educate the next generation in American ways. When the fighting started, however, the US took off its gloves. Funnily enough, it was General Douglas MacArthur's daddy, Arthur MacArthur, who first marched American troops against the forces of the Philippine Republic. This was in the 1899 Battle of Manila, waged on the 4th and 5th of February between 19,000 US troops and as many as 40,000 Filipino troops. The Americans won, and it was raw brutality from that point forward, with Filipino bolo knives, spears, and bows going up against the fearsome US war machine. The Philippine Republic learnt quite quickly, however, that a conventional approach wouldn't work. Instead, they opted to fight a guerrilla war. This bogged the conflict right down, as it was now harder for the US to distinguish combatants from civilians. Soon, they stopped trying to distinguish them. American Brigadier General Jacob H. Smith's instructions to one of his officers summarized America's new war strategy. I want no prisoners. I wish you to kill and burn. The more you kill and burn, the better it will please me. I want all persons killed who are capable of bearing arms in actual hostilities against the United States.